There are lots of Bible translations on the market. If you walk into a bookstore, you might be confronted with a bewildering number of options. You've got KJV, NKJV, ESV, NASB, and a lot of others that have abbreviations for the name of that particular version. Then you've got others like the Message, the Passion Translation, and the Voice. And there have been versions that people have produced, but folks today really don't use them much anymore because the language isn't quite dignified. For example, check out Acts 8:20 in the Cotton Patch version, or 1 Samuel 20 verse 30 in the Living Bible. There are so many translations that Christians often have difficulty choosing which one to use. Some are more literal than others, some sound very wooden, others sound more like the common vernacular. Older ones use stilted or archaic language, so it really can be a journey to find the one that's right for you. But there is one misunderstanding out there that questions the trustworthiness of the Bible based on the number of translations that we have. And this is how the argument goes. We can't trust the Bible because it's been translated and retranslated too many times. And there's another way of putting it. The Bible has been translated from one language into another so many times that nobody knows what it said originally. Basically, the idea here is that every text loses something in translation. When you take a text in what is called the source language and you translate it into another language, which is called the target or receptor language, things tend to get lost. For example, maybe you've got something in German and you want to translate it into English, but the German word doesn't have a precise equivalent in English, so you just have to find the closest fit. We've got examples of this in the Bible. One of the best words is the Hebrew word chesed, which is so rich that it doesn't have an English equivalent. So translators will try to capture something of its meaning with phrases like tender mercies or loving kindness. And sometimes you've got a phrase that might be translated precisely, but it doesn't seem quite as powerful in English as it does in the original. Maybe in the original, the wording is considered to be very strong for that culture. But when it's translated, it sounds much weaker. It's just missing something. And then you've got idioms that might mean a great deal in one culture, but if you translate it into the language of another culture, it might just sound confusing. So, like in French, when you say the carrots are cooked, it means that the situation can't be changed. Things are over and done with. Or in Dutch, when you buy something for an apple and an egg, it means that you got it very cheaply. Unlike in English, where if you get something for an arm and a leg, it means it was very expensive. So when you translate a text from one language into another, we can see how some of the meaning can get lost in translation. Well, in the case of modern Bibles, we can look back at the history of translation and just imagine how much of the original meaning was lost in these countless translations from one version to the next. Who knows what the Apostle Paul originally said or what Jesus taught, because our modern versions are just translations of translations of translations. It's almost like a game of telephone where you whisper something into someone's ear and it goes down the line until the message you have at the end is totally different than what you had at the beginning. But see, here's the problem. Translations that we have today are not translations of translations of translations. When someone says you can't trust the Bible because it's been translated too many times, it shows that they don't understand the translation process. They think that the Bible just jumps from one version to the next, with the message getting more and more garbled each time. In reality, almost every version goes back to the original biblical languages. We've got almost 6,000 manuscripts of the New Testament alone, and we have hundreds of manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible that were copied even before the birth of Christ. The first translation of the Hebrew Bible into Greek occurred over 2 centuries before Jesus, and we have that translation too. It's called the Septuagint. The oldest copy of any known biblical text appears in the Ketef Hinnom scrolls, which date to the 6th or 7th century BC. When biblical scholars translate the Bible, they don't go back to the previous English version. They go back to the original Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic texts. So they're going back to copies that were produced 16, 17, or even 18 centuries ago. They're going back to the oldest copies we have that are as close to the source as we can possibly get. So if someone says that we can't trust the Bible because it's been translated too many times, it means that they have some pretty serious misconceptions about how translations work. And if that's stopping them from taking the Bible seriously, then maybe we can enlighten them.